Well, the concerns with the industry, it's about the impact that salmon, let's call waste from the fish that they get fed fish food, they eat that, they expel it, and that adds nutrients to the environment, and especially into that one location of Macquarie Harbour. That nutrient imbalance is creating algal growth and an imbalance in the ecosystem that sucks oxygen out of the water, basically. More broadly than that, though, there is the same concerns but spread out all across the, let's call it an industrial precinct, where there's farming up and down the coast of Tassie as well. And there's similar issues about water degradation, let's call it, around the salmon farms in the ocean environment as well around the coast.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with the industrial descriptor. Going past these places on boats, and we were on 2 boats. One of them was an enormous commercial cruise, but we also went on a smaller boat on the east coast and went pretty close to the pens, and they are enormous. They measure up to 240 metres in circumference. They're huge things, and they go down about 20 metres underneath the surface of the water. So they're pretty tightly packed in there, about 10,000 adult fish. Well, I think the big thing, obviously, is the Maugean skate. This is the prehistoric creature that is endangered, and it only occurs in waters where salmon farming is occurring around Macquarie Harbour.
As Bianca rightly pointed out, it's so rare, it's classed as critically endangered, top red level alert of dropping off the face of the planet, that there's this open question about whether this practice in that one confined harbour can continue, or if the risk is so great that it's too much of a threat to the future survival of this prehistoric creature that occurs nowhere else in the world.
There was a mass mortality event in summer this year that killed more than 1 million fish in the salmon farms. That was probably the thing that got most people's attention. There was some pretty arresting footage of, salmon, huge amounts of salmon dead inside the pens, which were taken by drone footage. And there was also the pretty revolting prospect of chunks of salmon washing up on beaches surrounding the pens, people walking their dogs and coming across enormous chunks of salmon. Pretty gross stuff. The industry is valued at about $1.37 billion a year. It's a big money earner. It also employs, depending on who you ask, between 1,700 and 5,000 people in Tasmania. Some of them direct jobs, some of them indirect jobs. But Salmon Tasmania says that it employs about half the working population in Strahan, for example. There's 5 seats in Tasmania, and 2, depending on who you ask, 3, are very much in play this election. So we've got Bass in the northeast corner of the state, Braddon along the west coast, Franklin on the southern tip, Clark, which covers Hobart, and Lyons, which covers the centre of the state and the east coast. 2 of them are ultra-marginal and really in play. So Lyons is held by Labor on just 0.9%, and Bridget Archer for the Liberals holds Bass on 1.4%. Even though Braddon is on 8%, held by Liberal MP Gavin Pearce, who's retiring, Labor absolutely thinks it's in with a shot in Braddon as well.
The Prime Minister in the traditional battleground seat of Braddon. Coalition strategists believe the salmon controversy could determine the future of 3 Tasmanian seats and possibly the government.
Jobs are dependent upon this industry, an industry that plays such a critical role. My government supports jobs.
The Prime Minister was very clearly saying, I'm here, Anne Urquhart is here, and we fully back this industry and the workers and the union that represents them.
On the eve of the election, have you sold out your environment credentials for a rotten, stinking extinction salmon? Extinction salmon.
She went to the local Costco in Canberra, picked up a whole gutted, dead salmon. It was defrosted. She snuck it in to the chamber underneath some copies of The Age and Sydney Morning Herald print editions. Fantastic use of the product. It was a piscatorial stunt, but it had a serious meaning for her and the opponents of a move that Anthony Albanese spearheaded. She was protesting the government's reform to environment law, essentially removing the right of third parties like environmental groups and so on to challenge the approval that was given to the Macquarie Harbour farming operation. Sarah Hanson-Young was making a point that she vehemently disapproved of the move. I think that Anthony Albanese has made a calculation about how to maximise his chances of picking up all the seats he wants to, and he's doing that by sidelining environmental issues and making controversial calls on those issues. Salmon farming is a case in point. The calculation he has made is that the voters he annoys by doing that have nowhere else to go in his mind except to the Greens, and typically the Greens' preferences will flow back to Labor. Voters might just suck up their disappointment and vote for Labor anyway, or thirdly, if they choose to vote for one of the rising number of independents, Albanese has done the numbers, and you better believe he gets the abacus out before elections himself and personally runs the numbers extremely carefully, and he's decided that those independents in the number of seats that he's worried about won't affect Labor's chances of winning the election. So essentially he's saying we need to champion the blue collar vote or the vote for people that are concerned about the economy, because we don't want people worried about jobs, cost of living, and inflation and so on to be put offside by our more environmentally minded reforms.
And I'd say that they've done some pretty solid work on reducing emissions. That's been a big factor and a big focus of this first term. But I think you'd have to say that, Anthony Albanese came to power promising to strengthen environmental laws, and he's actually significantly reduced them or weakened them.